You're listening to Mystic Magic, exploring our spirit to understand our lives. I'm Celeste Frazier, your hostess. And today, Mystic Magic fans, we have another great guest. It is Reverend Ruth Littlejohn. Reverend Ruth is a Science of Mind minister. She's a leadership and spiritual coach. She specializes in human development. So she's a diversity and inclusion practitioner. She's a workshop facilitator, and she is a good person. Stay tuned. This is Mystic Magic, exploring our spirit to understand our lives. Hey, fans of Mystic Magic. We are ready for another great episode. And today, my guest is Reverend Ruth Littlejohn. She is a professional coach. She's a minister. She is a diversity and inclusivity coach. She's a life coach. She's a spiritual coach. She is the woman you go to when you need some support. She has been really called a client whisperer, and that's her way of being able to very adroitly connect with her clients. And so she has workshops that she presents, all kinds of personal development programs. She is really a calming presence who helps to reduce stress and create a safe environment. And so they say if you're experiencing too much drama, feeling disengaged, or you feel like you're riding down the escalator to retirement, meet with Reverend Ruth and outline a new path that's focused, aligned with your passion, energizing, and fulfilling. Welcome, Reverend Ruth Littlejohn.
Reverend Celeste, thank you. My goodness, all of that's me. I own some of that for sure. For sure. It's so good to be with you. Yeah.
Always a joy, my friend. So thanks so much for agreeing to be on Mystic Magic. Actually, I was listening to one of your talks that made me choose the topic, cut the drama down, as the basis for our discussion.
Okay.
And so of your many titles, spiritual coach is among them. Now, what motivated you to become a spiritual coach?
Well, Celeste, growing up, I grew up in traditional religion. A family that, in my family, if you didn't go to church, you couldn't do anything else. So we went to church every Sunday. And so grateful for that kind of upbringing. When I left home, I started to look for something different. And the difference was that I wanted I don't know how I can say it. I was born before my mother was married. So you can imagine in that was a horrific thing. And so that was her sin. And it felt like in our teaching that there was nothing I could do to let that go. So honoring her. And so there was something about, I needed something that had me be free. And so I moved to Philadelphia, walked into this place called Psalm Place, Science of Mind Place, and they were singing Brand New World. I took a class that said that, now I still get emotional, that's many years ago, that there was nothing I could do that would have me not be whole, complete, magnificent. I mean, nothing.
Yes.
And so just hearing that was so soothing to my soul. It felt like brand new world was there. So that changed my life. I took a lot of classes and really started to use the tools and got a chance that I didn't have to wait to go up to be heaven. That I discovered that I could have a heaven, that I had something going on. I wasn't calling it heaven at that time. But if I did the work and did the study, that I had a heaven within. And so it changed my life. I became a practitioner and all of that. And so I was so moved by what happened, that I experienced, that I wanted to share that with others. And it has been, a journey ever since, continuing to just be present, that I have a choice. I have a choice in how my heaven is within.
Well, yeah, you have a choice, and you became a religious science minister. You were already the successful business person, but what made you decide to become a religious science minister?
Well, let me start off by those people who are into horoscopes with no Sagittarius. We're always shooting for something. We always got. So I had been relatively successful in the business arena and had taken a lot of classes and start to see that some of my behavior, I wasn't able to take my whole self to work.
Mm.
And so I'm saying, if I am this successful not taking my whole self to work, what would it be like if I could take my whole self to work?
Yeah.
And so I started to look at ways to do work differently, and grateful for the corporate experience because, great training. So then I got a chance, and I was doing some of the work. How can I say it? I was not using the S word at work. Spirit. That's the S word in case people were wondering. I was not using the S word at work, but I was being spirit.
Yes.
And so therefore I was having people drawn to me. They weren't quite sure why.
Mm-hmm.
I remember one day I was saging my office and security came up and said, is there something going on in here? So I got clear that I needed to make a change. I was not being in line with the venue, what they wanted there. And so decided to really continue to do the work, but add more spirit to it. So that's how that happened. And that was probably around 2000. I think around 2000 is when that happened. And so that's how that transitioned. Yeah.
So they're calling you a client whisperer. That tells me that you're a good listener. What inspires you to listen to people so intently and supportively?
I find that when I'm able to listen, that people feel heard, they feel present, they feel acknowledged, and there's some sense of safety happens.
Yeah.
And usually people, my experience, when you listen, people tell you what they want and what they need.
Mm-hmm.
And so that's my goal. I am not one of those people. I mean, I have great intuition. However, I also like to have a sense of where the client is and what's going to work for them. What are their words? And so that's the piece. And also, I happen to be what do you call it? An introvert. So that means, it doesn't mean that I don't like to talk. It just means that the way I re-energize is being alone and being quiet and being listening and introspective. So I think it's a combination of those. Yeah.
Okay. Everybody wants to be heard. That's for sure.
Yeah, it's powerful. I mean, it reminds me of my mother. I mean, she would say the same thing 50,000 times, and I got clear. She didn't think we ever heard her. And she said louder and louder. I was like, oh, yeah.
Right.
So,
repetition is emphasis, right?
Yeah.
So you are a diversity coach. What grade would you give our country for inclusivity and equality?
Well, first of all, I'm a diversity practitioner, I call myself.
Okay.
And in terms of our country, I would say our country, if I was giving us grades, I would say our country is probably a C at diversity. And what I mean by that, we understand numbers.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, we know we need to get some people of color in and women in the mix. So we got the numbers piece. The challenge is that if we were looking at inclusivity, we'd probably have a D.
Mm-hmm.
Equity, we'd have an F.
Mm-hmm.
And then most recently, Mary Frances in her book, Black Fatigue, added another injustice in it.
Okay, yeah.
Yeah. So we'd probably get a D. Yeah.
Okay.
So I think the numbers part, the last couple of years, that's been our focus. Let's get the numbers. But getting people in your house and they're not feeling wanted or included, they can't bring the whole self, not feeling treated appropriately. So there's a balance missing. And I think we're at a moment in time. I feel so grateful to still be on the plane at this time.
Yeah.
For so many reasons that we get a chance to, in organization development, we call it, there's a stage where life is frozen, and then there's an unfreeze. So there's a space for you to get things moved so that when it freezes again, it's in a good place. So we're in unfrozen now. So the goal is all the stuff that we're doing, that when it sets again, that we will be in a much, much better place as a country and as a people.
What do you think we can do to get better grades?
Oh, wow. Well, I think doing our own work. I mean, it is what I mean by that. It's me, one of the workshops that I do is really getting in touch with the internalized racism for me as a person of color.
Yeah.
And I partner with Champion Fleming. They are white and they work with white people to get in touch with their internalized supremacy. Because if I understand what's going on with me, and then I know how to change. Mm-hmm. So that's the part that I think is so important. And so that's the place that I have been looking at, where have I sucked in, believed, embraced what I've learned here in America about myself as a person of color? And how does that show up?
Okay. So I'm going to ask three more off of this now.
Okay.
I wanted to understand, first of all, why you call yourself a diversity practitioner. And tell me the difference when I say diversity coach.
Well, a coach, it's usually, when I think of being a coach, it's me listening at what people have going on and what they want to do and helping them get there.
Mm-hmm.
A practitioner for me is someone who is giving people the experience to get them in touch with what's going on. They are not quite sure what's missing. And so their practices, my goal is to help you understand what's going on and then give you practices that will help you shift your life and create a change.
Okay.
And so, yeah, I started out many years ago as being a diversity, trainer. And so then I was the quote, the expert. Then, facilitating now is holding the space for people to get in touch with their own greatness. And so practitioner is helping people to learn practices to change their lives. Because, this is an inside job. It's not, we've done I always call it putting on the aluminum siding. We've done the window dressing part. We're now into doing real serious structural change.
Yeah, so going from the salami in the window to a more equitable society. Now, we got that on the individual level, but how can we get there on a cultural level? And by cultural, I mean, starting with the United States, for example, we have roots in supremacy that was really what built the country. So how are we going to unravel that?
Well, I'll give you a slice of a possibility of how I see that happening. I think when I think of our practice in science of mind of forgiveness, I think there is a place for us as a country moving back to the place of forgiveness.
Yeah.
For this experience, forgiving ourselves, forgiving the country and the structure. And then once we've done the forgiveness, I think you've got to ante up. Yeah, this
Talking about reparations.
Exactly. This is what's happened. We've forgiven. Forgiveness is not a fast and done thing. It's a process.
Yes.
And so it's forgiveness on both sides. And then I think there's got to be some outstanding debts that have not been paid.
Definitely.
And so that's got to be done. I don't know what that looks like, whether that's an individual or whether it's really creating educational or mental health and other kinds of systems that would support us in this whole thing called equity. So I think that's a place, so it reminds me a little bit of, what they did in South Africa, reparations and their conversations that they've had. But I think we've got to get there. And so we've done a lot of, what could I call it? Kiss and make up things. And this is no slight to those people like Martin Luther King and Vernon Jordan and others, John Lewis, who died. They did the best they could in the circumstance, and they got us here.
Yes.
And so I certainly honor who they are and what they did. And I was one of those people marching and doing all those things back in that time. But I do think we're at this point where we really need to do some deep forgiveness, and we need to honor the unpaid debt, and then we can move on. Then I think that will keep us from having to come back here. The reason why we keep coming back here, it's like we put a little scab on it, but we haven't dealt with the wound.
Right.
You can tell I am a symbolic person, lots of analogies. So that's what I think that would make a difference for us. And
that would be the way to honor John Lewis and Vernon Jordan and Dr. King, for sure. So you do a lot of personal development programs. What is your favorite one right now?
Let me start off by saying most of my friends growing up still call me a personal development junkie. So at least each year I'm doing something for myself.
Okay.
Whether it's landmark, sweat lodges, walking on fire, whatever, because I know there's a lot of stuff in here for me to live my highest. So out of my work, then I do other work. The biggest one that I have found recently has been most helpful is helping people to develop and sustain a spiritual practice.
Yeah.
That has been probably the most fulfilling one, because it helps us get in touch with our values and then figure out. My analogy is like many of us clients, when we talk about spiritual practice, it's almost like doing clay. You know how you do clay and fire it in the fire and it's good.
Yes.
And so then you want to put a handle on, you know what I mean? And then you try to put a handle on something that's already fired, and then it falls off after a while. So many of us, we want a spiritual practice, so we try to shift it in with all the stuff we got going.
Right.
As versus looking at what's happening and saying, okay, let something go and create a space for this practice.
Yes.
because the practice is like I always say, it's like my American Express card. I don't leave home without it. I mean,
Amen.
and of course, I must admit, I read a lot of stuff that deals with my whole body temple. By the time I'm finished with spiritual practice, I've acupunctured my feet. I've done Kegel muscles. I've done, you name it. I've done it, prayer, breathing, all of it. So it's a full body commitment. Yeah. So that
Okay,
is
so
that's my favorite workshop.
sounds like you have a personal spa at home, huh?
You got it. Look at this temple we got. Takes a lot to keep it going.
Now, I've done sweat lodge, and I haven't quite got to that firewalk. Talk to me about the mindset of where you go when you do the firewalk.
Well, first of all, I think that I'm one of those adventurous. I'm a adventurous kind of person, so I've never done it. So I'm living here in Virginia Beach. I moved here to Virginia Beach to start a Science of Mind Spiritual Center. And when I got here after about a year, one of the groups here brought in Tony Robinson's group to do a firewalk. And in my mind, it's like, it's never been here at Virginia Beach. I'm here. My name is on it. Let me do this. And so what it really helped me do is really, they give you a lot of coaching. It's really get in touch to relight the fire within me about the passion of my gifts that I'm here to give.
Yeah.
And so that's what it was. It was an opportunity to do that. Yeah.
Oh, I wanted to hear the juicy details when you were fighting against doing it and what you succumbed to. Once you showed up, you were just in. Is that it?
Yeah, because, I think the thing that got me most in some of these things I did about 3 or 4 outward bound things.
Mm-hmm.
And those things will, they really are, for me, were the physical manifestation of where I get stuck. And I did about 3 of those, and I started to get clear that the more of those things I did, the more willing I was to do it. I noticed one of the one that got me the most was I was on my back traversing across a canyon, mountain, nothing there. And so I'm just like doing this, pulling myself on my hands. And I realized that as I got closer to the other side of the mountain, I just stopped. And then it hit me. It's like, girlfriend, nobody can come out here and get you.
Right?
You better get some arm muscles and start moving. And what I realized about this, Celeste, is that was my life earlier, was I felt, let me just do a little bit more than everybody else and stop.
Okay.
And so those kinds of physical things start to show up, and I start to get it. Okay, all right, girlfriend, you need to keep pushing yourself. You don't have to measure yourself by others. You were given a gift. You're to use it to its full power. So the same thing with the fire. It was like, oh, another opportunity for me to, to do it. So I didn't have any trepidation because of all the other many, many thousands of things that I've done. Okay. I always have that courage. Okay, so it was like, oh, okay, let's do this. And they did good coaching, and I, walked it, and it was great. It was just another opportunity to do that kind of work. So I was excited. I'm an adventurous kind of person.
Now, you started Hampton Roads
for spiritual living.
Yeah, and that was several years ago. I know what my experience was opening up a center. I just thought it was the thing to do. What made you create the center? And also, you're no longer
I resigned,
the minister there. So what made you come? What made you go?
Well, my life has been sort of like, if you remember, I think it's Billie Jean's Michael Jackson video, where he puts his foot down, then a light comes up. Put your foot down. That's how my life's been. I step on something, I don't see the rest of the road, and then it shows up. Right. So that was how ministerial school showed up. It's like, okay, you go now. So I went to ministerial school, powerful, in San Diego. And even after ministerial school, I still was dancing around becoming a minister. And the dance really I got in touch with the dance was really, in my family, there were not women ministers.
Sure.
So it took me a while to get clear I would go forward, and then I'd push back. I would do that. So finally I did that. And then I did some visioning with one of who's now deceased, Reverend Annette Cameron in Columbia. We visioned for about 3 months about what it was I was to do. And I worked with some other people. And, Virginia Beach kept showing up. I'm like, Because I left Norfolk, which is not too far, in 1959 because of the segregation going on here in this area to go to school in DC. So this was like home, and I hadn't been living here in about 50 years. So after a lot of resistance, I came back, and I got clear that I was to develop an opportunity for people to get what I got when I walked through Psalm Place. that I was a divine child of God, whole and complete. And there's nothing I could do or say that would negate that. And to find tools to transform their lives. And if I say that was the gift, that was what I was to do. That's what I heard. It's like, okay. So the piece that's a thread for me is that if you look at my corporate career, I was always a part of new large corporation startup. I was part of Metropolitan Property and Liability when they started. I was part of Astra Merck when it started up. I was helped to reorganize. So there's always been. So when I came here to start, it's like, okay, this is what I'm to do. So I came here to start the center. My biggest gift was my sister, because I figured I'm always, if there's always an outlier in the family, that would be me. Mm-hmm. Okay, God knows we don't know what she's doing, but she's not in jail, she's not on drugs, she's not pregnant. So we're sending her some love. So anyway, so I showed up and said I wanted to do this. And so I figured, nobody's going to stop me. So the biggest surprise, my sister stepped in and was like the partner. I mean, she was probably at the center more than I was. And her consistent support in so many ways allowed me to attract others who helped to build the center. Mm-hmm. And so I mean, the thing I'm most proud of is that I saw people's lives transform. I saw people who had been wanting to leave and do things for years, and they would join. Because, once you make a commitment, the universe helps you. So they would join tennis, they joined Hampton Roads, and they'd be gone. My sister said, well, maybe we need to change the name. I said, no, this is a part of the process. This is part of the process when people commit. So I saw people, I saw people go back to school. I saw people move through cancer. So that was the goal for the center. And so about the 5th year, it felt like it had been founded. Mm-hmm. And what I know is I'm founding energy. Mm-hmm. I'm not particularly good at watering the plants afterwards. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And so I'd said to our core council that, in the next couple of years, I would like to step down. Mm-hmm. And they heard me and figured out what we needed to do. And so in 2018, I resigned and left. And in the meantime, so, once you resign, it's not my goal to bring in the next minister. It was the core council to decide the next minister. So we did posts, we did all the things that CSL asked us to do. They did. And we didn't get a lot of people who were interested in moving to the East Coast to a small startup. And so a young lady came in as a guest speaker from Agape. She sent an email. I had 10,000 emails at that time, by the way. And somehow I saw hers, and she said she was coming to visit her son in Massachusetts, and we need a speaker. I said, well, we have a spot for October the 10th, I believe. And so she came and spoke. People said, well, maybe this is what we want to have. So it's a core council decision. And so they met with her. The next thing I knew, they were talking about a letter call.
Right.
And the challenge of that is, was that meant we had to, the center, not me, had to leave CSL to become a part of the Agape Center. And so it's now Agape East, and Reverend Victoria Thomas is the person who was courageous enough. Can you imagine moving from California to Virginia Beach? And I always say to her that her consciousness.
Yes, I can imagine.
Can you? Oh, yeah. Yes, that's right. Yes. Her consciousness, there's a lot of, things have shifted in Virginia. So so she and I are in contact. When you leave a center, it's a little change. There's a woman I found that leaves a center. So my message was always, you can call Reverend Ruth, but we can't talk about the center. We can call Reverend Ruth because I think I wanted to make sure that the new person had all they needed to develop and not be involved in me. So that's what happened. So it felt like I was complete. It felt like I was complete.
You have helped so many people transform. What was your greatest transforming moment where you realized that mystic magic?
Really, along with walking into that center, the other one was one of the internalized things. One of the things that my mother brought us up with is go to school and you'll get a good job. And so I did that. Also, you need to work harder. Oh, it was this thing, you always need to work harder to prevail. And so I'd always done that. I mean, I always work hard. And after doing between all of my workshops and going to counseling, I got clear that I didn't have to work that hard anymore, that I was already doing 200%. Mm-hmm. And so when I got clear that I didn't have to do that, I actually stopped working that hard. That was huge because, the fear of somebody getting rid of you and all of that stuff. So at that moment, I got clear that I was more than enough.
Yeah.
And I remember my boss saying to me, you're the most diplomatic, insubordinate person who's ever worked for me. I said, what do you mean? And what they were saying is that normally when things need to be done, my hand was always up, but now it wasn't up. But if you wanted me to do it, I'm going to say, so what would you like for me to take off my plate?
In order
So,
to do that, right?
exactly. So that was huge because that's how I moved so fast because, I was always taking on more and more and more. So that was the place where I got clear in my soul, in my body, in my spirit, that I was whole and complete and more than enough.
Yes. Well, you are definitely more than enough. And I am so glad to know you. I am so grateful for the work that you do in the world that is transforming the people that you support, the way that you have a vision for the country and the world that is really, really one that is honoring all that we've been and all that we can be. What is coming up for you that we can share with our international audience? What can they attend or look at online? What is there for them to experience more of you?
Well, certainly the one workshop would be the spiritual practice, which is something you can certainly go to my, send me an email or you can go to my LinkedIn spot. My website has been going through its changes. I've learned a saying from one of my friends who significantly helped me is, done is better than perfect. Done is better than perfect. So as a recovering perfectionist, I don't have a website that's working yet. So certainly you can go to LinkedIn or you can go to Ruth at ruthlittlejohn.com. The spiritual practice is one that I'm doing. I am working with the spiritual intelligence tool, which is very helpful. And I am, after I finished the center, the thing I asked Spirit, what was next for me to do? And I got to do these circles. And so partnering with Champion Fleming and doing the racial healing circles has been really profound because I work with the African Americans or people of color. She works with white. And then the last two sessions, 7 and 8, we combine them and we have a conversation using the tools. And so for me, that's an opportunity to connect with the generations. It's an opportunity for us to get in touch with who we are and an opportunity for change. And so those, and we're getting ready to start to do one for men in April because people kept saying, well, how come you don't include men? Because I don't want to deal with patriarchy. And so I now have identified a African-American male and a white male who will be leading workshops for men in racial healing. So that will be coming up soon. Yeah.
Wonderful. Well, I am so glad to know you and I'm so grateful to have spent this time with you. Thank you for your yes to coming on Mystic Magic today.
Well, thank you for your leadership. We passed in graduate, but so it's great to connect with you and support you in any way.
Yes. All right. This is Mystic Magic, exploring our spirit to understand our lives. The drama is not required. It makes you tired. So give it a rest and be your best. Listen to spirit instead. Put the drama to bed. Ego will try to get your drama up high, but God's voice will give you a choice to choose love, not fear, and bring you near so you can feel its support and teleport you to a better place without disgrace and the need to apologize. Go ahead and revolutionize. That just means change, you see, from who you think you are to who you really are. And that's better by far. Thank you for tuning in today. Subscribe and be notified. When you subscribe to Mystic Magic, you will automatically be notified as to when the next podcast is available. So you can ask me when, or you can subscribe and be notified. Find Mystic Magic on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Google, Stitcher, iHeartRadio, or any of your favorite podcast venues. This is Mystic Magic, exploring our spirit to understand our lives.